So I needed a break from all of the coloring and the drawing that I've been doing this month. So I decided today I'm going to show you how to make paper clay. So you're going to start with 4 cups of shredded paper, and I put about 6 cups of boiling water in here and let it sit for 24 hours, but I ended up needing to add water later on, so probably about 16 cups of boiling water. You can do it without boiling the water, but I find that boiling it will help the paper break down better. You'll let it sit for 24 hours, then you're going to put it in a blender and get it nice and smooth. Here's where I had to add a whole lot more water to get it to where it's this smoothie consistency. Once it looks like all the paper it has broken down, you're going to run it through a towel. A tea towel would be best. I actually didn't have any tea towels, so I ended up straining mine through a cheesecloth, but a tea towel would be better. Once you get all of the water out of your clay, you're going to break it up into little pieces. You're going to add 5 tablespoons of cornstarch, 2 tablespoons of oil, and 5 tablespoons of glue. Then you're going to combine all the ingredients together until it's pretty much all incorporated. After you get all the ingredients incorporated, you'll put an extra tablespoon of oil in a plastic Ziploc bag. You're going to put your clay in that bag and finish kneading the dough inside the bag. I have tried other clay recipes, but I find this one is the best for molds, like what I have here. So I've got these clear molds are jewelry molds. The colored ones are cake fondant molds. You're going to start to fill your mold with the paper clay. Now it is paper clay, so there's little tiny fibers. They do tend to hold on to each other. So it's not going to be like working with a normal clay. It is going to be a little bit different because it is paper clay. Even though this is really smooth clay, you're still going to have little tiny fibers that tend to want to stick to each other, which can make moving the clay around a little bit difficult from time to time. If your clay is falling apart, you're going to want to add some cornstarch, oil, and glue. It's better for it to be too runny than too dry. If it's too dry, it's going to fall apart on you. You're not going to be able to mold it. If you get it too wet, you can still work with it, but if it's too dry, you just won't be able to work with it, and all of your stuff's going to crumble at the end. If you're working with it and it feels like it's hard to get it into the mold, you're going to want to add some more of your wet ingredients. The molds I'm using here are very small molds that are intended for charms. If you're using a bigger mold, you may be able to get away with some drier clay or a different paper clay recipe. There are others out there that don't require glue and cornstarch. It's just basically like paper mache. But if you're doing anything with really small molds, you're going to want it to be more like a pre-packaged paper clay. So once I was done filling all my molds, you can tell I only used about half of it. I still had half of the clay left, so it didn't take a ton of clay. Unfortunately, when it comes to paper, not all paper is the same. The ratios can vary. I did my best to get as close as I could to try to give you a starting point on the measurements, but usually I don't measure, I just kind of eyeball it. Some paper is going to be more dense, more thick. They're going to have different consistencies, so you may have to alter your measurements a little bit. I would not recommend, if you're doing anything with a really small mold, any kind of magazine covers or anything that's going to have a glossy paint or finished texture. I would keep it pretty simple with basic white paper. Maybe cardboard might still work, but I wouldn't do anything outside of those for something that's really small. Once you've let your clay dry completely, it should pop right out of the mold. You shouldn't have to force it. I'm using silicone molds here. I've not tried any other molds. If you have mold release, that may help. You might be able to use a different kind of mold, but I pretty much just stick with the silicone. Because I was trying to get this video finished, I ended up putting mine in a dehydrator to dry it out faster, and that worked really well. For my coral here, I have never got this to come out perfectly before, but I finally got it to come out perfectly. I just had to put it in my dehydrator to make sure it was completely dry, and then it popped out just fine. The reason I like this paper clay is because you can use ingredients that you would normally throw away to save money. Normally I wouldn't use the electricity to dry it out, but if you're not concerned with cost, you can do that. Keep in mind this is paper, so it's very fragile, so you have to be very delicate whenever you're working with it, even when it's dry. Painting it will give it a little bit more stability, but be mindful of how you're storing it and where you're going to be putting it on. I would recommend to put it onto a flat surface. If any of these little tiny parts are sticking out, it's only a matter of time before they break off. I did have one of my butterflies break on me, but for the most part, I didn't have any mishaps. Once I was done with that, I just got my X-Acto knife out and I cleaned up all the edges where all the paper fibers were sticking out and just cut those off. I went ahead and painted some gold on my stars. I painted a couple of flowers, a gnome and a mushroom, and the rest of them I left unpainted because I'm not sure what colors I'm going to want to use for those. For the really flat ones, I can put those inside of, junk journals, Bible journals, things of that nature. For the really thick ones, those will be something that I put on the outside of like junk journals or something of that nature. Outside covers, because some of them are pretty thick. So the thin ones I try to use on the inside, and then the really thick ones I use on the outside. So here's some of the ones that I painted, as well as some of my older ones that you can see. And if you want to see what it looks like on a junk journal, this is a junk journal that I made for a family member. And I put my octopus on it, painted it in black, and then covered it in gold paint. So it looks like metal. And here you can see how thick it is from a side view. And then for the really thin ones, I put those inside of a junk journal for my niece. This little fairy junk journal that I made her. And put some of the small like mushrooms and dragonflies on the inside. So there you have it. This is a perfect way to make little DIY embellishments for junk journals, arts, crafts projects. You can mold it by hand if you're talented enough. If you're not, you can buy some molds and make some really cute charms and embellishments. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, let me know if you want to see more like this.